Good evening, everyone. I'm glad you could make it tonight. This is our first program session for this particular class this year. To give you a little background, this program has been taught both in live and now in VLIVE, and it's actually being converted to strictly online as well as an option. The live class we've done a couple of times. The logistics of it is pretty challenging to get set up. It's also a 3 day program and it's very intense because all this is combined in 3 solid days. And so it's pretty intense. Computers are all set up, everybody does everything. But it's a neat class, but it's very difficult to get it scheduled as well as to get the logistics worked out to make sure that it happens. So a few years back, I said that we've got to figure a better way to be able to provide this information to the industry. And so we started creating what we call VLive, which is sessions such as this, which I'm live presenting. And then you actually then have hands-on that you're going to do with an assignment portal and a training server that you're actually going to use QuickBooks. That took a lot of set up and planning to make this all work. So, and I know it's a little complicated because you got one URL to come watch this presentation. Then you have a URL that you go to the assignment portal. You have a URL that after this is done, this is being recorded, and tomorrow by usually around noon, I'll have it up in the replay area in YouTube so that you can have it to either refresh, or if you weren't able to attend, you're able to take this program. And then we, of course, have the RDP connection to actually connect to our training server that everyone has a login so that you can actually use QuickBooks. And I realize there's a lot of different things that you have to get used to, but I assure you that once you get in the hang of it and knowing what you do, it becomes a lot easier and more of a routine. So the VLive program has been very successful, and we are converting it also to an online program that you can learn at your own pace. Now, give you a little insight on the VLive program. We've done this. This will be the fourth time that we've done this program. The first two times that we did it for the week apart. Each session was 1 week. And to be honest with you, every attendee failed both programs. Now, I kept looking at what was taking place, and the attendees were waiting till, let's say, Sunday night to do the assignment. And it really, that late into the game, it's really too late to get assistance from me and for you to get the answers correct. Now, you will notice that in the assignment portal, which we'll look at the last thing this evening, you get 4 chances to pass the test. If you don't pass it the first time, you got to take the test over again, and you can then pass it up that you get the 4 chances. Now, I really encourage you, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, to not just wait until the last day and think you're going to be able to pass this program. You will probably fail. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of things that you may not be familiar with, and I want to warn you that it gets progressively more difficult because we build upon things. So especially when we get to section number 5, 6, and 7, that's the real meat, and most of the transactions you actually perform in QuickBooks fall into one of those 3 sessions. So it's going to be a lot more items that you're going to have to do. Now, so tonight's the assignment shouldn't be very difficult. So the online is going to be a little bit different. It's still going to have a presentation like this. It's still going to have the online portals and things that you're going to use. But instead of having to wait 2 weeks, you can do it as fast as you can do it. But you also can do it a little larger. It's going to be a 6-month window that you can take the program versus the 16 weeks. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility and more options as well. But I thank you for taking it. This class has really done much better. After we switched it from the first once a week to once every 2 weeks, everybody's passed. So, and then we've actually enhanced it with some other features that I'm going to explain as we get to the end. Now, you all should have received your workbook. I got it confirmations that everybody has got it. So this workbook is a vital component to this program. You're going to need it most likely for the assignment each time, because the assignment's going to have a lot of the information that you're going to fill out in this. It's going to be some of the questions. So the questions are going to be broke up into two different types. There are going to be questions that are related to the workbook and overall information. And then there's going to be questions that you're going to have to go onto the training portal, perform something, create a report most likely, and get the answer that it's asking the question. And then you come back. So that being said, you'll notice that in some slides that you're going to see, you'll see that there's a book in the bottom corner of the screen. The page number is listed there, and that basically gives you an insight of what page we're on. Sometimes you might get misunderstood. It's just going to follow straight along. But if you don't see a page number or see a book down there, that means we haven't changed from the prior one. So it's only when you see the number do we change pages. Now, the workbook itself, as I said, it's very interactive. It's used for all the assignments. It's also a great reference for you in the future. And in the back of the book, there is an index before the resource section. In that resource section, which is broke up with a yellow hard copy in between, which we're going to be using all the way through, there is before the resource section, there is a index, and that index is things that you can look up, things that you're not sure of. And if you just kind of look up the names and titles, you should be able to find the information on what we're talking about. And the other thing that we added on this particular workbook is on the back of the front cover. And if you want to open that and look at that real quick, there's a table there. And it's designed for you to keep track of your assignment scoring. I want to explain the scoring on the assignment portal real quick. And that is, you've got how many attempts you take. It doesn't affect your grade. I mean, I don't care if it took you 4 times or it took you 1 time. Your grade is whatever the grade is the last time you take it. Whatever that grade is what your grade's going to be. Now, that number of points that you received versus the number of possible points, you need to create a percentage for that. And then you want to keep track, because what's going to happen is each assignment is going to have an 85% passing score. So that's great. If you get 85%, you've passed that assignment. But I would encourage you that if you have more than one, even if you have just one retake done, try to get to 100%. Because as I said earlier, the earlier ones are going to be the easier ones. It gets a little harder, and number 7 is by far the hardest of all the assignments. Now, the point total, when you actually pass the program, is just 85% of all the total points. So you need to get 85% of 511 points. Well, if you get higher points at the beginning, that gives you a little bit more flexibility if you don't do so well in 1 or 2 of the other programs or other sessions. So the idea is to get 85%. Take notes. It should have blanks and I'll show you some things as we go through there, because you'll see that the ones that are blanks on your workbook should be lines underlined in the actual presentation. Give you a little bit of background on page 2 of myself. I've been a QuickBooks certified advisor, trainer, consultant since they introduced the program in 1999. I've been involved in this industry all my life. In fact, I used to do the family bookkeeping in 1968. And when I was in middle school during Christmas break, I would come into the proverbial box with all the receipts and checks, and then I had to put them in manually into journal entries, in journals and in ledger sheets, and get it ready and balanced for the accountant to do the taxes. I've always specialized in the collision industry because that's what I grew up in. Now, of course, because of the internet and because I'm on the internet as far as offering QuickBooks support, I get calls and I have clients from other industries, but it's still at this point at 95% of all my clients are in the collision industry. I am much of a specialist when it comes to management system integration and the use of management systems. So that's one of the expertise that I have. And that's actually created quite a niche for me because there really isn't anybody, the management system people that set them up, they really don't know what they're doing compared to the collision industry. They know how to set their software up. But then when you have a problem and you try to tell them what's happening in QuickBooks, the management system people point the fingers at the QuickBooks people. And if you call the QuickBooks people, they point the fingers at the management system people. And you just go in a vicious circle. So I kind of meet that with being able to handle both ends and know what's happening on that. And I do a lot of work on process training. Now, I've been a consultant in this industry on my own since the late 1990s. Now, I used to go all over the world training on lean, Kaizen, different types of management processes and working with shops worldwide. But I got up a little in an age and I decided that I needed to scale back this world traveling. And so I really have not focused in on going, overseas or to other shops, even though I've actually had clients in just about every state in the United States, most of the provinces, and in 7 other countries. But I don't do that anymore. I kind of focus strictly on this area of the business. And that's been I do 99% of my stuff remote control, remote access, and don't have to go travel and everything else. So that being said, I am an expert certified in all QuickBooks, all the QuickBooks products. I highly recommend the desktop program in our industry. There's a lot of reasons for that. I know that Intuit is really planning on moving to online, probably by 2030, but that will be difficult, as you're going to see, because there's an awful lot of users of desktop. And frankly, their online product is not nearly as good, and there are some things and issues with it that they really need to fix before they try to consider changing everybody over. Now, the whole purpose of this program, and I decided to design it because I wanted to not only give you as the students some QuickBooks insights, regardless of what actual skill level you are with QuickBooks, try to give you insights and improvement areas. I wanted to give you real hands-on activities based on our industry and be designed for all skill levels from beginning to advanced, and while including some really key accounting concepts for our industry. It is no doubt that in our industry, the accounting concepts and the understanding of accounting and profit and loss and things of that nature in our industry needs a lot of improvement. And that is my goal, not only with this class, but this class is actually designed so that you can get that information accurately and timely. So looking at this program, we got session 1, and when we look at the breakout of it, you're going to see that we've got some introduction things to go through. We're going to talk a little bit about management system integration. We're going to talk about some of the things like the company file, the user accounts, the toolbars and preferences, and QuickBooks shortcuts and Windows shortcuts. Now, most of that is actually covered extremely more in detail in another course called QuickBooks for the Collision Industry, Getting Started with QuickBooks. Now, that is going to be an online program strictly, and it's in development, and I got sidetracked with some other things, personal things, and some lots of things when it comes to another program they're working on that I haven't gone back and finished it, but it's going to go a lot more in detail in those areas. Now, and then we're going to be looking at reporting tonight. Now, typically you don't teach reporting in a QuickBooks class until the end. After all your inputs come in, then you talk about outputs. But I have to go through reporting because all through this program, you're going to be required to create reports to be able to answer the questions. So it's important that we go through some of the basics of reporting. And I also want to mention, if I would happen to forget, that in our replay section already, there is a supplemental video which is not, your replay section is not only going to include the recording of what we just did, but it's also going to include possibly some supplemental videos. So you should check that out, after each class, just to see if there's anything additional in there, because some of these programs really need some supplemental support or information for you to be really successful at this. So we're going to go through the reporting as well. And then we'll go to the assignment portal separately and look at that as well. And then before we go to the assignment reporter, we're going to actually go online and go into QuickBooks and show you some of these things physically. That's typically what the class will work at. Is I'll talk about some things. In this class, we're going to talk about all the things, and then at the end do the QuickBooks. But in many of the other classes, we'll take a section, and then after we cover it, we'll go into QuickBooks and we'll explain it, demonstrate it, show how it works, and then come back and then do more. So that being said, we've got that session. Session 2, we're going to be looking at the foundation. We're going to talk about the chart of accounts, talk about the groupings of the accounts, and some key accounting concepts that you need to be aware of. And we'll go through these things and talk about some other items that are in the foundation, like the lists, the memorized transactions, the reminders, and even things like what the items are used for and classes are used for. Session 3, we start getting into processes. And that's we start with the banking, which really we're going to talk about deposits, your bank accounts, check writing, different things with that, online banking connections. We'll talk about that in session 3. In session 4, we'll start looking at the accounts receivable or /sales. And we'll look at the sales and how they are brought in from a management system, how they're done manually, talk about the customer centers, talk about some of the fixing up and the cleanup of some of these centers. And we'll talk about the different management system integration issues that you run into with this area. Session 6, we start getting into the accounts payable. And like I said, session 5, 6, and 7 are all accounts payable of different levels. And this is where most of the work that's done in QuickBooks is in your payable side. Then in 6, you got the next session of it. And then you got 7, which you've got a lot of actual hands-on examples that are real live examples that a lot of people make a lot of mistakes on these. And then we're going to go through those. And then session 8 is going to be, first of all, the first 7 sessions are all going to be March 31st, 2020. As soon as we go into session 8, it is going to be April 1st, 2020. So now the month is done. What do we have to do to get the month ready to close? And we're going to talk about bank reconciliations, credit card reconciliations, cleanup of things that are not correct. And then we'll talk about the process of closing. Now, this is just an overview of the process. There's a 6-session course on this that is what got me sidetracked on the getting started class. That is going to be an online class. It was going to be a VLIVE class. Didn't have enough people that understood what it was, so we're making an online class instead. And then there are some additional things that we probably will not have time to talk about. But if it's something that actually you're of interest in, make sure that you email me and ask me some questions, and we can have a dialogue on it, like job costing in QuickBooks, inventory control in QuickBooks, budgeting in QuickBooks, and fixed asset managing in QuickBooks. Those are some things. We're not going to spend a lot of time, if any, on these things, but it could be things that I could help you with otherwise. And then, of course, in the end of the manual, there's some online resources that are available, the index, as I said. And if we look at some additional programs, if you're interested in. So this program is actually certified through AMI. You may or may not be familiar with what AMI is, but AMI stands for the Automotive Management Institute. It was created back in the early 1990s by ASA. It is actually what ICAR is on the technical side, AMI is on the management side. They have very specialized programs for normally the non-technical repairs of the automobile. Now they have got into some because Chrysler uses them for their Chrysler program, but basically AMI is designed for management. You can, if you pass this program, they will give you 48 credits toward their management degree, and that's quite a bit of credits because I think it only takes 110 to graduate from the program. So a lot of good things. And if you don't know anything about AMI, go ahead and go to amionline.org and you can see about what they are. Now, I'm going to say this several times, and if you're a client of mine, you'll probably hear me say this a lot. One of the number one mistakes that I see our industry people do is relying on the accountant or the CPA that they have to do all this for them. You're not picking the right person. If you were going to take a certified plumber, and the certified plumber is very qualified in plumbing, but you wouldn't call him up and have him do a wiring on a commercial building. It just isn't his skill set. 99% of all the CPAs and accountants that I have worked with or deal with focus on two things: taxes and your compliance to employee regulations. That has nothing to do with your business performance. And that's the problem. Their whole concept and idea is not conducive for you to get the information you need to find out how your business is performing. There is no correlation between tax liability and business performance, other than if your business performs really bad, you may actually have a loss when it comes to taxes. But CPAs and accountants are really minimally involved in your business. They actually use generally what you give them, and that's what they use to create your tax forms. They don't understand your business. They don't understand how it works. They don't understand the targets for your gross profits in different areas. They just simply, that is not their focus. And with that, they basically can't identify improvement areas because they don't even know what the KPIs are for our industry. They're not very much experts in QuickBooks. Now, they may have somebody that has gone through QuickBooks training, but I will guarantee that if you do well in this program, you will be more qualified in QuickBooks than the staff that they have in their offices. They can take QuickBooks files and bring them into their tax program. And if they have a good tax program, they can export the changes to your QuickBooks. But other than that, that's their total interface with QuickBooks. They're usually like a bull in a china store when it comes to going in there and fixing things. They start throwing in all kinds of journal entries that are incorrect as far as how the process in QuickBooks must be done. They might get their report to print out right, but believe me, those transactions never go away. And they're sitting someplace, and then you'll run across them in some way. Because there is a QuickBooks process that would have fixed it, but they don't basically know how to do that. Now, they also need very minimal reporting detail. When it comes to doing taxes, there's only a few different areas in which they divide your expenses up. But that's not how you do it if you want to see how your business is doing. You need good detail. You need the ability to look at a global and then be able to focus in on more detail to be able to see what you're really doing. You can never tell what improvement areas you need if you don't have the detail to be able to see it. And so that's why we have such a disconnect between this. CPAs and accountants do their job with taxes and employee regulations, and then you need to have QuickBooks, and if you have a management system, integrated properly so you get the information that you need to see on a regular and timely basis. So now this class is going to be working on this process. It just continues around. We start out with the VLIVE session as we are doing tonight, and that's at vlive.aeii.net. and your login is the 025 2022 1955, and that will log you in. Each week it's the same login, it's the same session, the same thing. You'll get there, you'll get the screen that says the meeting hadn't started yet, and promptly at 7 p.m. on Eastern time we'll start the program. Then you'll have a session assignment, and when you go to the AEItraining.com, we said your email and QuickBooks One is your username and password. The session assignment for that week will start at 8 o'clock or be available starting at 8 o'clock of the session night. And then it will become unavailable as of 6 p.m. the Monday before the next session. So that would be like 2 weeks later. Already there was a session in there for welcome and introduction that everyone should have connected to and completed. And unfortunately, there were several of you that did not do it. So there are 6 points right there that you can't get because you didn't do it, and it's now closed. That's going to be the same case when we talk about these assignments. These assignments are due no later than 6 p.m. the Monday before the session. And I again suggest you don't wait until the weekend before to take a look at it, because there isn't going to be enough time for you to be able to get an answer or a question answered, or we to get you, back on the right track. So now the AEI hands-on portal, which is the RDP connection, that will log you into the training portal, and then you double click the QuickBooks icon and it opens up, and there should already be set up for that training file. And if it's not, I'm going to take a look at that tomorrow. I've got an email from one of the students. Not even sure from the screen capture that I've got how you even got to that screen, but you should just be able to double click the QuickBooks icon and it should open up the company file, and all you have to do is log in. Your username should already be in there, but it's student-L1 and then QuickBooks One with a capital Q and capital B for the password. And then you do whatever the assignment tells you to do with it and then get the answers. I am going to talk a little bit about the reporting. You do need to print and save the report each time that you do it. And we'll talk about the naming convention. It all is listed in the introduction of each session, and you should pay very close attention to those instructions each time. Then, of course, there's the replay and supplemental information that is in the replay.aeii.net. That information is there. Like I said, this recording will be on there by noon tomorrow, and there's already a supplemental video for reporting on there as well. And then anytime you have a question, then email me at help@quickbooksrs.net. Then also, that's one of the value-added items that we came up with for this 2-week session is 1-to-1, 1-2-1-training.aei.net spelled out. That takes you to a scheduling portal, which you can schedule up to 4 30-minute one-on-one sessions throughout this program to help you if you're really stumped. And the way I would look at it is, if you do the assignment the first time, you don't pass, and you get it the second time and you don't pass, that would be the time to actually send me a help email from it to ask me some questions. And then if the third time you don't pass, then I would schedule the 1-to-1 training to be able to take 30 minutes and be able to spend the time to go over it so I can make sure you're on track. And then we repeat this. This process is designed to not only give you information, but to make you to apply it and then demonstrate that you are aware of how to do it. And again, as I said, it really doesn't make any difference if you pass every assignment in the first attempt or the fourth attempt. The most important thing is that you pass it. And that means that you've taken the time to actually learn it well enough to perform the functions. So that's what our goal is. So, as I said, Intuit wants to try to get everybody to online. problem they have is they already have 4 million desktop users in the United States. It is by far the most popular small business accounting program in the United States. It is also very popular in some other countries. Not all countries, but it is also very popular. I've got clients that have it in Australia. I've got clients that have it in Canada. I have clients that have it in South America. So, and they have different versions because of the way taxes work in some of these other countries. But it's going to be very hard to convert everybody, 4 million users to desktop. I mean, I would project that it would be very difficult for them to turn it off by 2030. I just don't see how they're going to do it unless they make a dramatic improvement in the online program. Now, let's talk a little bit about nothing else. I also sent an email, the last email I sent, ask every one of you to click on the link to do a quick questionnaire. And that questionnaire was important because it asks you, number one, if you have a management system. And if you do, which management system do you have? Now, a lot of you're already either clients or we're working right now, and I already know a lot of this information. But I think it was only 4 questions long, and I've only got one attendee that actually did it, and he's already a client, so I already knew that he didn't have a management system, and he doesn't have a management system yet. So I needed to kind of get an idea, a handle on which systems we are, because then I can talk the language of that system instead of just talking CCC1, which is by far of those that I know that are on here that have management systems that I know so far is the most common one. And I'm going to talk a little bit about CCC1, but a lot of the things that I'm talking about in CCC1 are the same, but they may use a slightly different terminology with that management system. Now, if you don't have a management system, you can see that if we take that whole center section out in that chart, what we're going to have is a collision estimating system over here. We're going to have some kind of paper system, folder system, something like that we've had for 50 years, that keeps track of all the receipts and stuff like that, and all the telephone numbers, maybe notes, those type of things in a folder system. And then we have QuickBooks on this side. And you'll have to do work manually over here. Then we'll have to then do it and input it in the QuickBooks accounting system manually. Now, the management system, when it fits in the middle, does a lot of that for you. But you have to understand that an estimating system is going to come out and export either EMS or BMS, and it goes into a management system unless you have CCC1 and you only use CCC1 estimating. Then it's integrated into one management system. That's really their value proposition. Having an estimate and a repair order being basically the same thing. That makes it so much simpler than having to manage the file in the estimating system, make changes, and then export it back into the management system to update the management system. And then you're constantly going back and forth that way. With CCC1 estimating, it's all together. Now, if you have Mitchell Connect, or if Ultimate's even still available, or you have Auditex, you have to still do the same thing. You have to manage the file in the estimating system, send it into the management system, because once it's in the management system in CCC, you can't adjust anything. It kind of locks that file. So you still have to do the import-export. Now, the only thing you have to understand on a management system, there are only 4 things that come from a management system into QuickBooks. And it doesn't make any difference which management system you have. There's only 4 things. You're going to send the sale invoice over. And if you don't have a management system, you're manually entering the sales invoice with items. You have your customer payments. When you receive money for the jobs, those will transfer in to QuickBooks. And if you don't have that, you have to create the receive payment button, and you have to then create those payments that you received, and then they go into the undeposited funds screen. Then you also have bills. So every part you purchase that's on account, or any kind of sublet bill, towing bill, parts bills. If the vendor is not COD, it transfers into QuickBooks into the bills. So they're awaiting when you get your statement. Now, if your vendors are COD or you're paying all your expenses normally COD, those transactions in the management system should not come over to QuickBooks unless you're going to use a process that I'm going to talk about in accounts payable. Most shops don't, because most shops, when the vendor comes in with a COD bill, or you've already used a credit card to pay it because you had to pay it when you purchased it, it's already in, or it should already be in QuickBooks in the check register. If you wrote them a check or paid cash, it already should be in there. You don't want another bill coming over from the management system, because if it does, it's doubled the bill. And I see a lot of clients that I work with that when we go out to clean up their QuickBooks, there's lots of those in there that has been sitting in there for a year or more that need to be cleaned out because they've actually doubled your expenses. And then, of course, credits are the same thing. If you get a vendor credit or return, if it's on account, that credit will come into QuickBooks and be available for your statement to reconcile. And again, if it's a COD vendor, they're sending you a check and you don't actually go through your management system. You just create a line deposit, which we'll talk about in banking, to add to the return of those items. What is not transferred is nothing to do with labor flagging, nothing to do with hours worked, nothing to do with payroll transfers from a management system into QuickBooks. Now, management systems all have a method of flagging labor. If you're on a flat rate system, they have time clocks to keep track of time. Somewhere along the line, they print out a report. And from that report, you go into QuickBooks or to your payroll company and you input that information to create payroll. But there's only 4 things that go into your accounting system. One thing to keep in mind is that it's very important, if you do have a management system, one of the main goals of a management system is to create a check and balance system for your accounting. I mean, to be honest with you, our industry is one of the easiest industries in the world to embezzle from. And that's primarily because most owners don't pay enough attention to their finances to keep that from happening. And they don't have a check and balance system to keep employees from doing things that they can do and you not figuring it out. So a management system can act as a check and a balance system, so they need to balance at the end of each month. And that's critical. That's critical not only to talk about the embezzlement, but also the accuracy of the information you're receiving. If they don't balance, which one's correct? And so it's important to get a check and balance system. And some of the issues that occur with management systems is a thing called parts other. And that actually starts into the estimating process. The parts other, excuse me, the parts other starts at the estimate, because each estimating system, regardless if you've got CCC1, has some kind of parts code table. In CCC1, they call it parts code table. Mitchell Connect calls it templates. They used to call it long expansions when they called it in Ultimate. And Autotext calls them quick entries, I believe, or manual entries, just simple name. And these are items that you would put on an estimate, the add-on items like cover car, flex additive, those type of things. But it can include a lot more. It could be 4-wheel alignment, 2-wheel alignment, internal wheel alignment versus external wheel alignment, different kinds of sublets, vehicle scans, all those things that you add on to the estimate starts in some kind of parts code table. Because if your estimators are actually adding those manually in a line, which every estimating system allows you, you automatically are creating a parts other unless you have actually mapped it with the exact same spelling into QuickBooks. And that is the challenge. That's actually the most of the work once you get the management system set up properly, integrated in QuickBooks, is fixing that so that doesn't happen. Now, labor category is also important. sublet types, breakouts. All these things are things that can flow from the management system properly if you spend the time to get it set up correctly. The main issue is usually because it's manually entered into the system rather than having an actual parts code table for that. Now, if you do have a management system, you have to understand that QuickBooks is the last stop on the bus line. There's no other stop, but there's a lot of stops before it. And believe me, all the poor processes that have been done prior to getting to accounting causes the issues in accounting. And unfortunately, that is not where you can fix it, at least even close to being easy. Garbage in is going to cause garbage out, and then your reporting isn't going to be of any value to you. The beginning starts in the estimate, as I've already said, but you need to have a final audit process. And we'll talk about that when we get into repair orders, about the audit process. You need to have an audit process that doesn't allow that to go from the management system to accounting dumped in garbage. Because if you do that, it can't be really fixed. I mean, I'm not going to say it can't be fixed. It's impractical to try to fix all that, especially if you got a high volume going in there. Manual entries, like I said, is the issues. Insurance requirements. You got to understand that you may have a whole set of parts code tables that you use when you write the estimate, but then you may have a whole set of parts code tables that you have to use if you've got different DRP relationships by insurers because they want to call it something else. And if you haven't trapped that with the mapping, it's going to go in as parts other. And then the other big reason is that you're not putting the accountability and the responsibility on the people that are using the management system in different areas. The responsibilities of what the parts person is, the responsibilities of the estimator. If you got customer service people, what their responsibilities are. If they're not doing their job, then you're going to be just pushing it down the stop line until it gets to accounting, and then it's garbage. So those are things that we want to look at. So now let's start out with the company file. And as I said, a lot of this information is in a lot more detail in another course, but I need to give you kind of an update to this so that you understand where we're at. The company file is everything that you have that's in QuickBooks with all the transactions, all your company information, all your list, all your accounts, all your preferences, all your users. If you have Intuit payroll, it's your payroll in there. It's everything about your company. It's all your data. And it must be protected. If you don't protect it, you're at risk of losing everything. And if you want to have some, just email me. I'll give you some suggestions on how to keep this from happening. I've had so many clients that have lost everything. Computer crash, theft, fire, you name it, they've lost it. And when you lose it, it's gone. So it's important that we protect it so you don't have that risk. Now, QuickBooks has three components. You've got QuickBooks, the program that you buy or on a CD or download. That program can be installed as many computers as you want. There's really no restrictions to it. And then there's a database manager that actually connects the company file to QuickBooks and handles the transaction, handles the transfer back and forth, and also checks your licensing. So that's the second part. And then the third part is the company file. Your company file can be located like on a server, or it can be on a computer. And from that, it can also be shared so that you can have other people in the company file as long as you have the user license to do it. You can have one user license QuickBooks and installed on 10 computers in your shop. They can actually access that company file one at a time because the one user license allows one person to be in that company file at the same time. Now, if I had a different license for QuickBooks, or I actually had a QuickBooks license that had more than one user, then it allows me another person to connect. The data manager, which is built in, that installs on where the data is going to be located, it actually decides that, do you have the right license? Is it a different license? And if it is the same license, it will tell you that you cannot, connect to this computer because you don't have a multi-user license on this file. Now, you can have different company files for different businesses or different things of that nature, and you can have somebody else in that file while you're working on another file. It only affects that one company file. When we look at user accounts, and this is important, this is probably the one thing that I almost always see clients haven't really considered. There are 3 types of user accounts. The first of which is the admin account. That is the default account that when you first open up QuickBooks and have a company file, that is the default user account. Then there's an accountant, or external accountant account, which we'll talk about what the differences are. And then we'll talk about regular users account. Users should always be set up. Every person that is going to be using QuickBooks should have their own user login. And it's going to be a regular user account. Admin accounts are not designed to be used for daily operations. It's only going to be used, as you're going to see, for certain functions. And you'll have a separate login for that. It is designed for mostly setup. So when you first log in, it allows you to, you're going to see it's going to set up your different user accounts, but it also allows you in preferences, and we're going to talk about preferences more in detail in a minute, but your preferences are set up in 2 different levels. One is your company preferences, which are global, that are set for everybody that logs in. And then there's the individual preferences that you're going to see, which are called My Preferences, which each person can do some customization of what they do. Now, it is not nearly as critical or as important as the global one. So that's why the admin sets those. Then you set up your users, and we'll talk a little bit more about the actual user account as well in just a few seconds. And then it also can be used to set the closing date. Now, that's normally not what we use the admin for. We usually use the external accountant for that, but we'll get to that in a second. And then it allows you to import IIF files. Now, this could be important, especially if you use a third-party payroll, because most third-party payroll uses an IIF file import to bring in all the stuff into QuickBooks. And it's used to initially set up payroll if you're doing payroll with Intuit. Now, I see initially set up. It set up the account, put in your charge card, set up some of the functionality between Intuit and you. But once it's set up, any user that you've given them that right can actually do payroll. And then the admin, as I said, any of the regular or standard users, you set up their access. Now, keep in mind, Pro and Premier, really the only difference between those 2 programs is that Pro will allow you to have up to a 3-user license, and Premier will allow you to have up to 5-user license. That's it. That's pretty much the difference when it comes to our industry. But their security or their user rights are broke up into sections, and they're only like 5 sections. And then there's only certain things within each section that you can either allow or disallow. And so it's not as robust and detailed as Enterprise. Enterprise allows you to actually break out users by task. In other words, I could actually create a user that their only job that they can do when they log into QuickBooks is import payroll. That's it. They can't access anything else in QuickBooks. So there are a lot more details, and you can actually set up your own types of roles in Enterprise. So it's a lot better than that. You can also have up to 30 people in a company file at the same time with Enterprise. And we'll talk about the restrictions other than that. Pro and Premier both have a 14,005 total names list limit, and that does affect shops that are doing $3 or $4 million in sales or more. Once you get to that level, you're going to reach that 14.5 probably in 2 to 4 years. And that then becomes a decision to what you're going to do when you reach to that limit. And this class is really not really detailed into that area. But if you have any questions on that, feel free to let me know. Again, users set up, and you shouldn't be an admin doing daily operations. Now, the special external accountant login, that gives all the rights pretty much that the admin has, except an external accountant login cannot see credit card information, and they cannot edit or set up users. Only the admin can do that. So once the admin sets all this up, there's really very little use for the admin. The external accountant is if you do have somebody that looks at your books at the end of the month to validate everything, to make sure it's all right, to kind of do a quick audit, then they do a closing date. They can set the closing date, and that's it. It also, if I was working with you, if I log in as an external accountant on your account, I can actually then click on what they call the accountant toolbox, and it will allow me to log in to Intuit, and it will activate a set of tools that I'm able to use that makes it a lot easier to do a lot of cleanup. I mean, one of the challenges is if you've coded a bunch of transactions to the wrong account. Well, the only way to fix that is for you to open up each one of them and change the account. Well, if you've got a lot of them, that takes a long time. With the accountant toolbox, there's a batch transaction choice that I can open up that account. It shows all those transactions. We can filter it by a vendor if you want, or we can just check them on a checkbox and then hit the button and transfer them all at once. I mean, I can do the transactions that may take you hours. I can do it in a few minutes. So that's another advantage of the external accountant login for an external accountant that has those credentials. And then let's talk about toolbars. You'll notice that bar across the top that has been on the screen for the last 3 or 4 slides. That is the toolbar that we set up in QuickBooks. And I know that many of you may, if you're using QuickBooks, you're used to clicking on the home button or the home screen comes up. I think that's kind of a waste because it is very limited to what you can actually do. It has the key processes, but there are some things that you would normally want to do that you can't actually do from that screen. And unfortunately, when you click on something to go do it, the only way to go to something else is to go back to the home screen and then pick something else. Whereas the toolbar is in essence the same concept. Everything is grouped by functionality. Everything is grouped in the order or the sequence in which they generally occur. And so you have a section for, let's say if you are doing payroll in here, you're going to have an employee section. You're going to have maybe some income sections where you're going to have your invoices, your received payments, your deposits, your banking. And then you'll have a vendor section where you have your checks, your charges, your reconciliations, your bills, your pay bills, and then you'll have your reports. They're all sequenced in there as what you use. And what's nice about it is they can be organized so it matches what you do. Now, when you click in QuickBooks, you'll have a view menu at the top. Now, it's going to come up default sidebar. And back in about 2010, QuickBooks thought it was a neat idea to come out with a sidebar like Outlook. Well, first of all, it takes space. The sidebar is not as customizable as the top bar. You have a choice under view, either sidebar, which is default, and you can choose top bar, or no bar. I always choose the top bar. And then we actually set these up individually because these cannot be set up globally, unfortunately. Every single user, it has to be set up. And so under your My Preferences desktop view, you're going to see it. Now they're organized for maximum efficiency because if I click on invoices on here, as you're going to see in QuickBooks when I do it, I can be in the invoice. And if I want to go to bills, all I do is click the bill button and boom, I'm there. And you don't have to go back to the home screen. You can just click the button because the button bar is always, the toolbar is always available. There's also a color change. Back in, I don't know, maybe about 2010, QuickBooks decided to create QuickBooks in this really dark drab, dark blue color. And it's almost depressing. So there is a setting that switches it to the light colors. And when you use QuickBooks, you're going to see that all this is already preset up. And you can see that it's a lot cleaner, nicer, and brighter, and well, more organized than what they give you from default. But all this is customizable. And I've alluded to the preferences several times already, but I want to make sure that I explain some of these preferences. There's two types of preferences. Under Edit, down at the bottom, Preferences, when you click that and we look at it later, you're going to see that there's two tabs. One's the individual preferences, which is called My Preferences. And you'll notice that My Preferences is underlined, so that's what fills in the blank in that particular one. And then the company preferences, which are the global ones, which only the admin or the external accountant can actually do anything with, are called the company preferences. When you click on that tab, if you're a regular user, you're going to get a message that says you can look at this stuff, but you can't do anything. And that's normal. Some of the settings in preferences, and there's a whole list of them. We're not going to go through them all, but there's a whole list of preferences that either are going to activate or inactivate a particular function in QuickBooks, or it will actually improve the efficiency in some of those. So that's why it's all set up. Now, the QuickBooks that you're going to be using has already been set up, and we'll talk a little bit as we go through things why it's set up certain ways to make it more efficient. But there are certain functions that we don't use in QuickBooks in our industry typically, like inventory. Most shops don't use the inventory function in QuickBooks. In fact, it's probably not really designed that much for our industry for inventory. There are some things you could do, but it's really not designed to do it in the same company file as your company file is. But if you're not going to use the inventory, we turn it off, because if you don't turn it off, there's always a chance that you make a human error and do something in inventory, which once you put something in inventory, you can't get rid of it. It's there. So we don't want to make those mistakes. Now, some sections only have company preferences because there's nothing a user by themselves would have any kind of customization. And there are some things that really don't have any company preferences, but are all based on what the user wants. The company preferences are global settings. And again, as I said, they are set for all users. Now, here's probably one of the most important parts of this section of the program. That is to talk about keyboard shortcuts. Now, in your resource section, right after the end of the yellow cardboard in there, the divider, on pages 2 and 3, R2 and 3, or one, excuse me, R1 and 2, there is a list of QuickBooks shortcuts. Now, I would encourage you to start realizing that these are going to be very important for you to become much more efficient in QuickBooks than you already are. The whole concept of shortcuts is to eliminate the number of mouse clicks. If you're on the keyboard typing something and then you're going to have to move someplace else, you take your hand off the keyboard, you're finding the mouse, you're finding the actual little pointer, you're clicking on it, and then you're moving your hand back to the keyboard again. That is completely inefficient. If there are several quick keys, that will actually reduce you from doing that, and you'll become a lot more efficient when it comes to using QuickBooks. And that's what I want to try to encourage you to do. Now, you will not learn or use both pages of these shortcuts. It's just probably not going to be feasible. Second of all, there's things that it does that you can do in shortcuts that we just simply don't often have to ever do. So if we look at some of these shortcuts, and these again are things that are underlined in your workbook, it is usually pretty intuitive what letter you use. And so like Control plus D, and what would D stand for? Oh, delete. D for delete. And what this does is if you're in a invoice or you're in a check or any kind of transaction, if I hit Control D, it's going to delete that transaction. It's going to give you a warning, and then it's going to delete it. Now, I would encourage you to read the warning. Usually there's a small warning, which means, do you really want to delete that? That's not the big one. But when QuickBooks knows that what you're getting ready to delete is probably not the right thing to do, it's going to give you a bigger warning. It's going to say something like, QuickBooks will allow you to do this, but probably not a good idea. And they'll tell you the reason why. When you get to that warning, if you hit yes, you most likely have made a mistake. Now, not always. Sometimes you have to do that to fix the issue that you have. But the vast majority of the time, that's telling you probably are making an error. Like possibly that this transaction has already been reconciled. This transaction was used to pay a bill or was included in a bill payment. Those type of warnings are telling you that no, you don't do this, and most likely you're not. Now the next one, Control plus the delete key, what this allows you to do is to delete a single line. So if I'm in a invoice and I have all the different parts, labor, and materials, I can click on that line and hit Control Delete key, and it's going to just take that one line off. If I'm in a deposit that has lots of items that I've deposited, I can click on that one line and hit Control Delete and take that line out of the deposit. Now, if you delete the line out of deposit, it came from the undeposited funds, it just puts it back into the undeposited funds, and you could add it to another deposit or what. Or if it's extra, then we have to use a different process to get rid of it. Control F, find. That's used in almost every screen to get to the advanced find screen, which we'll use quite a bit. It's much easier at times to click on the Control F and then put in the amount that you're looking for. We'll find all the transactions with that amount. Now, if that transaction amount is like a really common dollar amount, like $100, it probably wouldn't be the best way to find a specific transaction. But if you've got a $5,708.37, I guarantee that if it's going to find that number if it's in there, and that makes it easier. Control H for history. We're going to use that quite a bit when it comes to looking at something and then looking at the background history for it. Like in a deposit, if you've got a deposit and you open it up and look at it, you can hit Control H and it will pop up a screen and have all the payments and the dates, and you can go to those payments if you have to. It also can look at history for a lot of things. Control I, new invoice. If you are connected to a management system, you probably won't use this very often. But if you're not connected to a management system, then Control I opens up a brand new invoice. You can enter in the amount of the parts and the labor and everything else for the sale. Control J, that's going to open up the actual customer list, which we'll use quite a bit, especially when we're checking to make sure that the balances are correct. And then Control W, another important one. No matter where you're in QuickBooks, if you hit Control W, the right check window is going to pick up, and then you can write your check or take the money out of petty cash or whatever, but it's going to show up the check form. Now, one thing to keep in mind when it comes to dates, just about every Windows program out there has like a little calendar next to the box for the box. That is by far the biggest waste of time to go click on that, find the date, and click it. The best way to do in QuickBooks is just click into the field, and if the field is not blank, it needs to be blank, or if it's got a number in it, as long as it highlights, all you do is start typing. And the best way to enter a date is to type in the numbers. Like if you wanted to 3/31 or 2020, you type in 033120 and hit tab, and it converts it to 3/31/20. I can type in 3/31/2020. I can type in 3-31-20. It's going to do it. If I can put a slash, I can put a period. You can pretty much type it in many, many different ways, and it will turn into the date. That is so much faster than clicking on the calendar control. Now, when you go into that date and it's highlighted, and let's say it's today's date, the 25th, but you want it to be yesterday's date, if you hit the minus key on your keyboard, it goes back 1 day. If you hit the plus key, it goes up 1 day. I can hit the plus key three times, and it will go up 3 days. So depending on how close you are to the date you want, you can do that as well. And then we have to talk about a real important set of quick keys, and that is Control Tab versus Alt Tab. When you hold the Control T tab and hit Tab, and we're in QuickBooks, it's going to cycle through the different windows that are actually in QuickBooks open. Like if I've had invoices open, and I've got bills open, and I've got the Customer Center open, I can hit Control Tab and I can go between those. And it will go to the last one that was opened. And then if I need to go to the next one, I hit a tab again and to go to it. And then if I let go, if I hit Control Tab 1 time, it goes back to the one I was at the beginning. So you get used to doing that. Now this Control Tab will work in most other Windows programs. I mean, if you're in Excel with multiple sheets, you can go do that. If you're in Word and you have multiple forms, you can do that. Then you've got Alt Tab. The difference between Control Tab and Alt Tab is Control Tab works between windows within the same program. Alt Tab moves between programs that are on your desktop. So if I've got my management system, or I got a spreadsheet, and I've got QuickBooks open, I can be in QuickBooks and I can hit Alt Tab and I can jump over to either the Excel sheet, or I can jump over to my management program. And then when I hit Alt Tab back, it goes right back to QuickBooks. That gets your back and forth to your programs much, much quicker. We're going to go ahead and talk about a couple of other things real quick. Shortcuts, other ones. There's window shortcuts. These are important ones. One of the things that you have to understand about Windows is that there's a Windows convention that if they wrote the program properly, this should apply to any program you're using. If you notice that bar across the top, you notice that each one of those things have a letter underlined. Now, some programs hide that until you push the Alt key down, but generally Windows programs will have a letter underlined. What that means, if you push the Alt key and that letter, that menu will drop down. And when it comes to buttons, you'll see buttons all the time on all kinds of programs, and they try to get you to take your hand off the keyboard and go to the mouse and click it, when in fact, you don't have to do that. In QuickBooks, if a button is blue, all you have to do is hit Enter, and it activates that button. You can also notice that in that Save and Close, the letter A is underlined. So I may not want to save and make a new one. I may want to save and close this form. All I have to do is hit Alt-A, and it will save and close that form. It's so much faster than doing the mouse for everything. And then moving forward into QuickBooks and most Windows programs, you use the Tab key. And then if you want to go backwards, you use the Shift tab to go backwards. You don't have to take your mouse and click it, and if you have to go 2 fields over, hit Tab. And basically, if you want to go back, hit Shift tab. So those are the shortcuts, and that's what we're going to use throughout this program. And I'm going to try to show you these things as we do it in QuickBooks. Okay, reports. There are basically these types of reports that we're going to be using throughout the program. The reports for lists, and list means anything that's named. Your chart of accounts, your items, your payment types, your terms, anything that's got a list, names of customers, names of vendors, those are all lists. And you can have reports based on that. Then you can have detailed transactions, or summary transactions. And so your detailed transaction will show you all the things that are included in that one transaction, where a summary will just be the total. Now, what's neat about QuickBooks is all reports are live. So if I create a transaction report and I get to a number over there, I can actually double click that number and it will open up the actual transaction. That's called Quick Zoom. That actually brings up the transaction in its detail, even down to the form that I used to create that transaction. So you can go all the way down to it. You can also use quick reports. Any kind of name list or anything like that, if you right click that name at the very bottom of that menu, it's going to say quick report. And I can then create a report based on whatever I'm looking at. I can find all the transactions that we had for body labor and sales. I can find all the transactions that I want for all the sublet vehicle scans. And then I can actually go into that report and I can customize it, because it's important to be able to customize. And it's also important that once you get it customized, you want to memorize it, especially if you're going to use it again and again. Now, in our class, we have a memorized report list, and you're going to see where it says training program reports. There are going to be some reports you're going to want to memorize to start with, and we're going to be able to put them in the groups that we're using. And you'll see we'll have some various groups that we'll talk about as we go into the class. There is a memorize button on every report. And when you click on the memorization, it's going to first of all recognize what the name is. And if it's already in there, it's going to ask you if you want to replace it. If you want to save a different report for a specific purpose, you want to create a new one and change the name slightly so that it's identifiable in the list. And then you're going to then put it into the category that you want. When you create the report, there are two of them that we're going to memorize tonight. And that is going to be, and you're going to memorize, and you're going to put them in your QuickBooks this week, the profit and loss standard report and the balance sheet standard. Those are two important reports that we're going to use throughout this program. Now, there's going to be some more that we're going to use, like the open invoice report. And if you have a management system and nobody's ever told you about the open invoice report, what I'd like you to do tomorrow is open up your QuickBooks, go to open invoices, go into, you might either go to the memorized report, and it's under customers, or under reports, under sales, customers, you'll see open invoice reports. Open that report up and see if you have a lot of transactions in there, lots of pages. And there's lots of sections where they've got little dollar amounts or they got zero amount, but they're still transactions. That is an issue that we're going to cover in the sales of it, because it's a big issue if you have a management system. We memorize these. We're also going to be using the unpaid details report, especially in the accounts payable, and the sales by customer we're going to use to be able to do the matching and making sure that QuickBooks and the management system is in sequence. When we customize them, there's lots of filters, and we're going to look at this in hands-on in just a second. But when this customization tab pops up, you've got a filter that you can filter it. You've got a header column that you can actually customize the name and how it prints. You can also change the fonts and the style of the report. But we're going to be looking at these as we go through this program. So if we go over to QuickBooks now, this is what should pop up when you use QuickBooks, or it may already, and I would have thought that all of yours would have come up automatically when you double click the QuickBooks icon to your login screen. Now, once you get to this screen, you know that your username is QuickBooks. One with a capital Q and a capital B. Once we hit this, I must have typed it in wrong. Okay. Let's see. Should open up to this area. And As you can see, the toolbar is already set up. We have the different functionalities of everything we're going to do. We have memorize reports section here, just like we saw on the screen. And to start out with, and again, like I said, I want you to watch that video. It's a supplemental video on reports. It will help explain some of these other things. The ones we're going to save is under company financials. We're going to be going to profit and loss standard. And you're generally going to be looking, well, your assignment's going to tell you what you have to have it set at to. But generally, it's going to be either a particular month. But as far as your memorized one that you're going to use on a regular basis, will most likely be the last month one. But there are different options as well. Now you have an accrual versus a cash basis button up here. In your assignment, it's going to basically have you do both. And you're going to get a lot of different numbers based on whether or not you have it set properly. And then your date. So if we look at this, we've got a profit and loss. And if we want to memorize it, we're going to use the Control M. Guess what M stands for? Memorize. Control M. And now we've got our profit and loss. And we want to put it in our training program folder or group. And that happens to be the first one on the list, so it's already there. And we hit save. So then when we close this, and then go to our memorize reports, there's our profit and loss that we're going to use during the assignment. And the same thing's true if we are going to do the balance sheet one, company financials, balance sheet standard, last month, and accrual set up right now. We're going to hit Control M, balance sheet, save, and we hit OK. So the customization on these, you'll notice that a lot of things are on the report now on the front. They didn't used to be there. They used to have to do most of your customization, even for dates. You would go into here and change it here. A lot of this stuff is the same that's on the front. And then your filters, we can do different things. A balance sheet and a profit loss would generally not necessarily have a lot of filters. Although if you wanted to make a subsection of your profit and loss just to show certain accounts that you're looking at, then yeah, we would filter all those other accounts out. Your headers will let you whether you want to print different things and you want to rename it. You can rename this report. So those are basically the customizations. Now what you want to notice, and let me show you something about why we're going to see the chart of accounts. My dog decides he wants to play. The profit and loss, you may actually notice that the profit loss only shows normally the accounts that are being used that month. So this profit and loss can change as far as the lines in there. And there's different filters that we can do to always print the same things. We can export it to Excel, but let's say we don't want to see all this detail. We've set these chart of accounts up so that if we collapse the rows, it creates a one-page P&L for the key categories and the key groups, which we're going to cover next week. But we can break this down into very larger chunks. But if I wanted to look at my breakout for sales, I hit this little triangle and now I can see the breakout. But if I want to, first of all, start on a higher level and look at things, I can look at them on a higher level and be a much shorter report. So going through QuickBooks and seeing how to use it, look at the reports, supplemental video, it will help you get through that. And like I said, we can see our general ledger. This is our check register for our general operating account. We have petty cash account. We have different buttons for the different functions that we're going to be doing throughout the program. So as we come to the end of the class tonight, we have a session assignment. You purely plan on about 90 minutes worth of work on this assignment. When you log into the assignment portal, you basically are going to be instructed what you need to do in this particular assignment. Do all the questions in order. That's really important. Do not skip around on the questions, because you're going to be doing something in QuickBooks. You're going to be printing a report, or basically saving a report. And then after you're done, you may go into QuickBooks and do something else. And you may end up having mess up if you've done them in out of order. Your reports will not be in sequence. Now, it's important that you print your reports as a PDF and place them in your reports folder. Now, there's a naming convention on how you use you name the reports. Starts out with a capital S for the session, which this week will be S1, and then you put a dash, and you put a capital Q, and then what question this report is for, and then you save it. If you miss that question, you do something different in QuickBooks, and you create a different report, then you rename it S1 Q1A or Q3A for the different report, and up to B, C, and D. That then indicates which attempt you use that on. Because if you have a question for me that you don't understand why you missed the question, the first thing that I'm going to do is go into your session report and look at the report that you used to get your answer. And first of all, I'm going to check and see if your report is right. Because if your date isn't right, or if it's not accrual versus cash or cash versus accrual, or you don't have the right account set up that you're looking for, then you're going to get the answer wrong. And it's easier for me to figure out what you did wrong. It's important that you do this for every question, for every session that has a report that you need to run to be able to get it. Next week, or next session, we have a 15-minute beginning that we go over any of the key things that people have missed. Now, if I see a trend, you might even get an email from me that I might even create a session supplement video, because I've seen a trend that people are missing something. I will make sure that information has been relayed to you properly. Now, in that 15 minutes that we have at the beginning of the next session, it's not designed to reteach the whole topic. I'm just going to go over a higher level of why the question, what the answer is. And again, help at QuickBooksRS.net after the second time you've missed it, and then consider one-to-one-training.aei.net if you've missed it for the third time. And I'll be happy to be able to go over that with you. So again, remember, it's due 6 p.m. the day before our next session. So that being said, that is tonight's session. Next week, we're going to get into the foundation, all the chart of accounts, and things of that nature. And we'll talk about some of the mispostings that a lot of shops do. So I thank you for your time. And if there's anything else, you can rewatch this again if you'd like, or anything else you want to pick up. Thank you, and have a good evening.